If you want to help Myth Vision Podcast grow, you can join our Patreon. There are different tiers, as well as help out with PayPal. Thank you so much. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and comment.
Now to a commercial break. Are you having trouble with baldness? Are you afraid that Yahweh might kill 42 children with 2 bears based on your baldness? Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have Hair Bald Remover Hair Attachments. You guys can contact us at 1-800-heretic.com. Back to the program. Dr. Price, what do you think of that? Don't you think that literally that would be ridiculous to interpret that literally?
Yeah, the closest I could come to that is, because I always say that is one passage you will never hear a sermon based on. And there are a few others too. But the closest you can come to defending it is to say it's kind of like the story of the Ark of the Covenant nearly falling into a muddy ditch, and the Levite or whoever he was tries to steady it by reaching his hand out, and for his trouble he gets electrocuted. And what was the problem? What did he do that was wrong? I mean, I think that story is a scare story about how you handle the Ark of the Covenant, and given what it's supposed to be. And so, look, I don't care what the excuse is, don't touch it without ritual preparation. And later on they do say that those who carry the Ark have to be ritually prepared. This poor jerk wasn't. Well, so you could say the same thing here, that, hey, watch out with the man of God. He isn't just some guy. Careful what you say. And that makes a little sense out of it, but it's still so outrageous. These poor stupid kids, what did they know? Hey, Chrome Dome! What the heck is the story about? Well, astrotheology to the rescue, because this is, I mean, once you understand that framework, this fits in perfectly. Elisha is bald. Why do they tell you that? They normally don't spend a syllable describing anybody in the Bible. When they do, it's got to be for some good reason. And this is like, just like Isaac and Esau, what is it? Jacob and Esau, I guess, right? And it goes out of its way to say that
Esau's hairy.
Yeah, and he's the Edomite. He's sort of a caricature of the hairy, supposedly Edomites, with red hair. And then his brother is a smooth man. This comes up because of the trick they pull on their father, Isaac. And what's the original point of that? Well, they are the sun and the moon. The long hairs, the sun's rays. The redness is the sun at dawn, and the smooth one is the moon. And you can do this with Abraham and Isaac and various other ones. Well, that's the case here. We're only told that Elisha is bald because he's the moon, just as his mentor is Elijah is the sun, because he's also described literally in 2 Kings 1, I think, as a hairy man. Why mention that unless it retains, though perhaps no longer understood at the time of writing, a reminder that he's the sun? And what the heck about the bears? Well, they are the Great Bear and the Lesser Bear, the constellations Ursa Major and Ursa Minor. And so it has to do with all of that stuff, which should, I know fundamentalists hate this kind of thing, and yet boy does it get them off the hook, because it turns out, like, once you understand that the Canaanites who were slaughtered in Joshua and elsewhere, that didn't really happen. That's all. It's very similar, surprisingly, to the fundamentalist spiritualizing of the Joshua story. That for us, the relevance is that the Canaanites are besetting sins, and under the leadership of Joshua, or in our case Jesus, we have to annihilate those sins. Oh, that's good. Well, that's close to the original point, because the wicked Canaanites are really fictive alter egos of the pre-Deuteronomic Israelites before they cleaned it up and made it monotheistic and centralized worship and all the stuff, that worship various gods and images. Well, that was them. But once they made these reforms, they decided to retroject them, to push them back in time and say that Moses at the start had told us not to do these wicked Canaanite things. But then how come, well, there's no way to erase the fact that that's the way things were. Well, maybe the Canaanites seduced the monotheistic, non-idolatrous, Mosaic Israelites into their corrupt paganism. And they kept doing it, and the prophets would get them not to, but they do it again. No, it's just a way of saying, this is what we have to do. Let's not be like those whom God expelled from the land, the pagan Canaanites, in other words, our own ancestors. The expulsion from the land might have been a wink toward the exile. But that severely undermines any historical reading of the narrative. But that ain't bad if it absolves you of saying that God ordered genocidal blitzkriegs. So there's a good side to this.
Is there any significance, you brought up Joshua in light of all that, real quick before we wrap up this one, because I love the whole baldness concept, which astrotheology best explains.
Yeah.
Or else you're left with a actual ridiculous story. I mean, to believe that literally, to me, it just doesn't make sense. I used to, but
well, that's what Origen said. He says there's hundreds, maybe he said thousands, I forget, of absurdities even in the Gospels where it cannot have happened. And this guy's a believer in the supernatural and all that, but he said the stories are silly if you take them literally, which ought to be a red light telling you not to. What is the problem? Like, did Jesus actually multiply the loaves and fish? Well, how do you picture him doing it? As Strauss would say, centuries and centuries later, what is it? Did he take a roll and stretch it out like a sponge and then snip it in half and then do the same thing? Absurd! No! Even if he's the incarnation of God, that's just ridiculous. And just because God could do anything doesn't mean he did everything. Well, so what is the story about? And theologians have always said with some plausibility, this is about the Eucharist. The multiplication is a symbol for how, though it appears to be simply bread and wine, there is a supernatural expansion of it into the body and blood of Christ. And that's not bad. I suspect that is the origin of it. This is not a new thing, and it doesn't mean you don't believe in miracles and the supernatural. That's really a whole different thing. Or like Samson, God could have given him the strength to kill all these Philistines one by one. He's got an old bone as a weapon, and it says he kills 1,000 men or whatever. Did they just line up? Wham! Next! Wham!
Everybody
Next.
just kept coming.
Yeah, it's absurd.
After the 575th one, you're going to be the guy who's the 76th there to walk up and fight him? I don't think so. 2 questions now. You brought up more than one. Joshua, real quick, sun standing still. Is this astrotheological in nature, do you think? Or what's the best explanation of that? And you brought up the loaves and the fish, the whole idea of the Eucharist. Why is there fish and not wine in that story? If it's the bread and the bread, which we know that the Eucharist is going to have the bread and the bread, why does one say fish and he doesn't say wine? You see what I mean?
It's possible that some early Christians had Eucharist with the bread and fish. Okay. We know some had bread and salt, and others had bread and water. So that's possible. But fish is a symbol of fertility also. Okay. Dagon, the fish god of the Philistines, was a fertility god, and he's depicted as a merman. So it's the parallel isn't complete, but even there, it's not all that far-fetched.
And then Joshua's sun standing still. Is that astrotheological, you think? Because Joshua would he be a moon figure or a sun figure? Because Moses was a sun figure, obviously, but... I always think Joshua's his counterpart, like
Yeah, that's right.
Russia, so.
Especially like in the thing with the patriarchs, Abraham is the moon, Isaac is the sun, and so forth. They're successors of one another, like the sun and the moon.
Right.
So yeah, that could be, though. I'm not sure what the stop. Both the sun and the moon stop in the story.
Okay.
Sun, stand thou still, and Ajalon, and the moon, and so and so. And that one seems to me just to be a kind of folklore miracle that God does it for. I mean, that's obviously the surface sense of it. God does it so they'll have extra time to beat up and kill the kryptonites or whatever they were. And but I don't know. It would make sense, but I don't see what that would boil down to. But that would sure stop a headache if you could find an astrotheological symbolism for it, because the excuses people use that what God did was to change the refractive index of the atmosphere so that the heavenly bodies did not change their motion, but it seemed that they did. And how can you live with yourself?